all the great breakthroughs in science came in unconventional ways, that unexpectedly.
Yeah. Why is that? That so many so many of the academic types in places like Harvard are so quick to dismiss these types of topics. Like I've had this conversation with Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist who discovered the Oumuamua, that he thinks was from another intelligent civilization. And some of his astrophysicist colleagues at Harvard would say to him, they hope to God they never witness anything like this or never come across any sort of extraterrestrial thing in their entire career. And it's just like it seems like such an
Right.
interesting thing why these people are so easy to
Well,
dismiss the
listen,
subject.
first of all, as I say in my book, um, Harvard is no stranger to unconventional science. William James, the father of psychology, who taught at Harvard 100 years before Mack, investigated seances and levitation and all that. And there was a lot of unconventional research going on at Harvard. There was, and there is. What turned Harvard off, I think, was Mack was well, first of all, he'd written a bestseller, and that didn't endear him to his colleague. He'd written he won the Pulitzer Prize on Lawrence of Arabia.
Jealousy.
Yeah, there was jealousy there. He was very sure of himself. I think he turned some people off in the way he was so sure of himself. I think he talked to he announced his research at Harvard before it was really well advanced. He had heard about the phenomenon from Bud Hopkins. He had collected his circle of experiencers, which is what he called them rather than abductees, because it's less a judgmental term. And he had begun his research. He learned about it from Bud Hopkins in January 1990. In December 91, he held a grand rounds, a lecture at Harvard, so less than 2 years later, where he introduced some of the experiencers on stage. He had a tape of a session where a woman was screaming that her pregnancy was removed. He outlined, everything he had found out. So he hadn't given it enough time. He didn't realize the opposition that was going to build at Harvard because it was very unconventional research. He didn't lay the groundwork for that. He didn't peer publish. It wasn't entirely his fault. He tried, but his articles were rejected because they were too complicated. And one publisher in the Journal of Psychology wanted more information and shorter. He wrote a 100-page paper on what he had found. This is before his first book. And he brought up his findings, 100 pages. He sent it to the journal, said, "We can't run this. It's much too long. But by the way, could you add some more detail?" So they had him. And he said, "I can't add more detail, and I need all this space and forget it." So he took it away. And the New England Journal of Medicine wasn't interested. They wouldn't even open up his envelope. Look, it was a difficult subject to address, period. And it probably needed a book. An article wouldn't do it. It needed a book. So anyway, we were talking about Harvard, and so you ask Avi Loeb why Harvard has been so antagonistic. I'm going to be on with him in the next couple of days on another program, and I'm going to ask him, what his experience at Harvard has been like, because in Mack's case, they gave him, time to I guess you could say gave him enough rope. And then they try to hang him with it. But they cracked down on him in 1994, about the time his book was published. So he had given that big lecture to Harvard in December 91. So December 91. So 2, 3, 4. So 3 years. 2 years later, they were on his case. But it's an interesting story about the Harvard investigation, because it was, as Mack himself wrote in an unpublished manuscript, it was a clash of worldviews. He was trying to explain, look, I came across this mystery. I don't know what the answer is to it, but it doesn't respond to the usual scientific, the ability to get to the bottom of it. I mean, we don't have any scientific proof of it, but we can't contradict it either. We can't figure out what's going on here. And Harvard's answer basically was, well, if you can't prove it scientifically, you can't, it's not there. And he was saying, well, there's something there, but I can't explain it. Exactly, you can't explain it, so it's not there. So that basically was the clash at Harvard. There were two different worldviews. One is the scientific materialism of the Harvard committee, led by a critic of John Mack, who he had clashed with once before, Arnold Relman, very eminent physician. And Mack, who was saying, well, I can't explain it, but this is what the people are telling me, and it's good evidence. It's good, compelling evidence, but it's anecdotal in most cases, almost every case. There's fragmentary bits of evidence that seem to back it up, but not conclusively. So I don't know, on and on. And the committee kept saying, well, if you can't prove it, it's not there. So anyway, that was the clash at Harvard. But in the end, Mack was exonerated. He had two wonderful lawyers that exposed Harvard's weak arguments, I would say. And he was reinstated. He was never uninstated. He was allowed to continue his research. No sanctions. They just said, please be a little more, be less enthusiastic, they said to him. And he said, okay, you're right. I was a little too enthusiastic. I'll be less enthusiastic. Because he acknowledged it. He was, that was one of the hallmarks of his nature, was to be, he didn't hold back. What he thought you could see in his writings. He was not devious. Even in his love affairs, a few of it, outside his marriage, he didn't, sneak around his wife. She knew what was going on. He was just attracted to other women, searching for this missing thing in his life. And he remained devoted to her. They had a good relationship, difficult, but good at the end of his life when he died. But he was not a sneaky guy. What he was thinking, you could see in his writings, in his speeches, etc. So, and that had a downside too. He wasn't very careful in how he structured his approach, and he might have gotten further at Harvard if he'd been, I don't know, a little less enthusiastic, a little more cautious. But in a way, that was his nature.